It's 1999 at the University of Cambridge. A lone computer science student gets an idea for one of the greatest games in history. When creating this game, he has a simple idea for attacking. Point and click. Then the character automatically attacks. This decision will have far-reaching effects in the future, where the game has a completely modernized tap targeting combat system. Effects that to this day split the game's community in half. This is the story of RuneScape's auto attacks. At the very beginning in RuneScape, attacking anything was quite simple. Just point and click. Not much more was needed. Your character would automatically attack the target and use the weapon's stick speed. DPS wasn't much of a concern back then, but interestingly enough, the max hitting classic seems to be 35 with the Dragon Axe. A couple years later, in 2004, everything changed and RuneScape 2 was released. This is what most people colloquially know as RuneScape today. New improved 3D graphics, new skills and hundreds of new quests were released in this era. And the players loved it. As masses flocked to RuneScape from Classic, hailing the transition as visionary, revolutionary even. What happened to the combat? Well, it remained mostly the same. They made a small change at the early years, giving weapons special attacks, making combat potentially a bit more active. These specs were tied to a resource that was spent when using one, but it was not a consistent DPS method. Rather a burst button for when you needed it. The most common way of dealing damage was still just clicking on your target and letting the game do the rest. Auto attacks going off in the intervals your weapon allows, and if you wanted to get really fancy, you could switch your weapons or even grab a spec weapon. Seems innocent enough, right? Nothing controversial found here. Then World of Warcraft attack. Well, at least this concept. See, WoW in 2012 released a massively controversial update in Kung Fu Panda WoW, and this was the time to capitalize, to become the one true WoW killer. The evolution of combat is one of the most controversial gaming updates in history, and some of you might think that this video is about that, as it has absolutely split the RuneScape community in half. But this video is about a much more complicated divide in the RuneScape community that is currently battling for the future of the game. From the ground up, EOC was meant to copy WoW and make a new tap targeting system with RuneScape flair, like prayer flicking and the tick system. But its implementation lacked the core aspects that made RuneScape special. Gone was the laid back and simple point and click method to do damage. And now you would have to get a university degree to understand complex ability interactions and synergies. It also doesn't help that on release this system was extremely bare bones and lacking, like range didn't have enough basic abilities to sustain a rotation, which caused a massive community backlash and an exodus of players dropping. Revolution was released a bit later to automate the use of these abilities, but too little, too late. The damage was already done, and most of the player base had quit.
Of course, evolution of combat's particularly good for PvP players. Combat and boss fighting will be about the skill of the user rather than just having really cool statistics. So please go and try it out today and be honest. Let us know what you really think.
So this is the deal. Below I've made a petition to bring back the old RuneScape. Not necessarily the old RuneScape, but rather the old combat.
But despite its rough launch, this is the version of the game that I fell in love with. Its little quirks and endless amount of interesting interactions have brought me countless hours of fun combat over the years. You might be wondering what any of this has to do with auto attacks. Well, what happens in WoW if you click an enemy? Does your character attack it? No. Your target is just switched to the enemy you pointed at, and now it's your turn to do the damage with your keyboard. But what happens when you click an enemy in RuneScape? To answer this question, we need to understand the transition from the old system. When RuneScape first announced the launch of EOC, a massive community voice was against it, and Jagex, to their credit, did ask a lot of these players what they enjoy about the current systems in RuneScape. This led Jagex to implement the old auto attack system into the game from the community feedback. but this was much weaker than using abilities, or just auto-attacking before the changes. This was a last-ditch effort from the developers to try and keep some sense of familiarity with the system, even if this effort was not recognized at all by the player base. Understanding this window of time, we can answer the question, what happens when you click an enemy in RuneScape? You auto-attack.
Huh?
You auto-attack. When porting over the combat system from the old point-and-click style, they wanted to leave some relics in, so people could just click and attack, but this created some issues when making the abilities, and initially ability damage was calculated based on the weapon speed and its damage, creating ability damage. It's sort of how this works still, but it's changed a bit. So why does this matter? Well, this weapon speed is still tied to the weapon in terms of auto-attacking to this day. To avoid players doing something like autoing and using abilities at the same time, using a damaging ability puts the auto-attack on an internal cooldown, which does not stop the highest level players abusing this system. This is quite complicated, but I hope you managed to grasp this concept. It is very important to understand the very real Grand Canyon in the community auto-attacks are causing. In the beginning, autos were used sparingly in combat, but quickly some people figured out that while using Berserk to boost your damage, using a defensive ability and an auto attack would be more DPS than some of the less desirable basics. And then another group of players figure out that when using magic, you can cast a vulnerability spell after Sunshine, as it counts as a defensive ability, making magic the premier debuff style at the time. This is quite a simple way to utilize auto attacks in combat, but it firmly sets RuneScape apart from its contemporaries. The auto attack timer I explained is a bit more complicated than I let it sound. On a typical 4-tick weapon you can attack every 4 ticks. Wait. What's a tick? Game ticks are just 0.6 second intervals where the server gets instructions from your client and then stuff happens. In its simplest form, if you click somewhere to move with your character, it starts moving there on the next available game tick cycle. The tick system is the biggest limiting factor for RuneScape, as everything that can be done has to be done in 0.6 second intervals, and the developers chose 3 ticks to be the default global cooldown abilities would use. This is quite different from other MMOs where global cooldown is a variable that can be changed in most of them. Like think of haste in World of Warcraft, that pumps your cooldowns and allows you for an accelerated burst damage window where players can showcase mastery over a class in a faster environment with shrunken decision making time and higher APM. For RuneScape this isn't possible, and a lot of elite skill comes from understanding the tick system alongside of the ability rotations, allowing them to push the quite slow-paced system to a much higher-paced action when making use of every trick that is available to them. As you can see, this limitation of ticks has bred creativity within the bounds of the system, and gone are the days of kids just clicking an enemy to attack. But back to autos. For the weapon tick cycle, this means that weapons auto-attack every 4 ticks, but there is a small catch. Since this process is automatic within the game, it takes an extra tick to start this cycle, as the game thinks, oh, I should auto-attack here, thus 5-tick autos. This works because auto-attacks do not start the global cooldown, but need to have time outside of the attack to launch. But magic is different. It lives outside the bounds of this system in a small critical way. Spells can be manually cast. What's the big deal here? I can already manually cast my abilities, but there is a key distinction here. Spells are not abilities, they are auto-attacks. And thus, when manually casting them, you can force an auto-attack to go off every 4 ticks. This creates a massive opportunity for players to use magic ability, then invoke the normal global cooldown of 3 ticks, wait a tick, cast a spell, and use an ability. This is what's commonly known as 4-tick auto-attacking. But this method has a massive issue. If you wear your dual-wielded weapons, and then cast this auto-attack on the 4th tick, you are casting an offhand auto-attack. This does 33% of the damage and isn't really worth using in any serious damage rotations. But what if there was a way to do 100% damage with every auto attack? Luckily for you, this is exactly what players figured out due to how attack speed works in RuneScape. If you're somewhat familiar with old school RuneScape, you might know that a weapon's attack speed is calculated after an attack, not before it. This feature has a very interesting consequence where you can cast an ability with your faster dual-wield weapons, then switch to your slower, more powerful two-handed staff, and force the spell auto-attack from that, dealing full damage. If you see 4TAA mentioned in RuneScape rotations, this is exactly what people mean, and this is a significant enough damage boost. This is where the divide really began. A lot of people claim that 4-ticking is unintuitive abuse of the tick system that only provides elitist DPS increase, and the advocates enjoy the added complexities the system offers. This is somewhat of a clean split. It's hard to find people who are in the middle of this argument. But of course, every time a powerful mechanic is discovered, people will try to push it towards its logical extreme, and this was no different. This has been patched out of the game, but before you could do this with every single ability, as the global cooldown from your ability would override the longer auto attack cooldown already set from the 200 attack. This was viewed as an elitist strategy that the developers had to remove for the health of the game, but they still decided to leave normal 4-ticking in. This was a relief to many who've mastered the technique and find an intuitive way to boost DPS using magic, and a massive black mark for others that find this level of APM and damage boosting to be unacceptable. This is a real divide still present in the community, but with power creep to abilities and damage dealing methods, 4-ticking has lost a lot of its luster and is considered very niche nowadays. How is it possible that the seemingly minor auto attacks can cause such a massive burst damage? Well, the reason is complicated. Let me introduce you to stalling. In RuneScape, if you cast an ability outside of your target, you store that ability within your character until you're in the range of the target. This is pretty simple, right? And helps especially with melee. Clicking an ability runs you in and casts this. Pretty simple, right? But what if we could store any ability and release it at the same time with another ability? This is where auto attacks come in. When you have an ability stalled inside your character, using an auto attack makes the game force the ability out first before it is allowed to cast the auto attack. It's like the auto has to go to the back of the line, and first we need to let the stalled ability through. But this only works when the player can manually cast an auto attack, and thank God we have spells for that. Spells are magic only. How do we... Introducing MacLeod. A debuff spell we can apply to a target with every style, allowing manual spellcasting in every combat style without the need to use magic. This is extremely controversial as it allows high-level players to abuse the game's systems to gain a significant advantage. The top 1% all smuggle in buffs inside boss fights before they even start, and usually release them on combat dummies to gain a significant damage boost before every single bossable fight in the game. And after gaining that initial advantage from the stacked buffs, they even stall an ability before the fight starts to gain an even bigger advantage. This has more impact on shorter boss fights where the initial burst damage is more meaningful. And this has entirely fractured the community in two sections. Let's call them casuals and sweats. And I firmly belong in the latter group. I can appreciate the level of complex interactions autos give, and I think it makes the endgame PvM much more interesting, firmly separating RuneScape from other MMOs with similar ability-based systems. To understand the casual side better, we have to rewind all the way to 2013, when Evolution of Combat first came out. This change made the casual point-and-click adventure into something much more demanding and complicated. This made players quit in droves, leaving the remaining players to pick up the pieces. Jagex made some efforts after this to bring back more of this casual feeling by introducing Revolution.
Did you know you can AFK Phase 5 Telos at 4,000% enrage? Nope, this is not a joke. This is actually the state of things right now. You put on this revo bar, you go into the beam, you click on Telos, and then you can sit back, relax, and watch as your character will clear out the entire phase.
A tool that automatically uses abilities. This system returned the belief of casual players that combat could be something that they could enjoy as well. PvM was still heavily restricted towards higher end players as manual input provided much greater DPS. This balance between casuals enjoying skilling and slayer and then could choose to move on to bossing if they decided to try and learn more about the game's combat system was good, but also fragile, as the game itself has no tools to actually teach players how to fight monsters, forcing them to seek outside counsel when looking for improvement.
Necromancy is a new skill for RuneScape and a new standalone combat style.
It's the first new combat style ever released in RuneScape. It's the fourth combat style, and it sits independently outside of the original 3 combat styles.
The combat level goes from level 138 up to level 150.
Necromancy has been designed in a way where it is accessible to all player types.
If combat's something you'd like to do more of, but at the moment you find the barrier to entry is a bit high for the existing styles, then Necromancy is a perfect way to actually get started on it.
A brand new combat style was released to RuneScape in 2023, and that fundamentally changed how auto attacks work within it. Gone were the weird clicking autos that just happen, and in was a new auto attack ability that works as a spammable basic. This fundamentally changes everything, and Necromancy has become a combat style that cannot use the traditional way of auto attacking. This release was controversial to say the least. Whilst it generated massive popularity at launch and brought back old players, its simple combat system also did not offer enough variety and challenge for those players to remain, and the player numbers quickly dropped back to normal. Except, during the release time, a lot of the most talented players in the community quit the game due to the changes that Jagex was making. Somehow this low effort style was the best DPS in the game, and worst yet, they've dropped a massive shadow nerf to all other styles in the game, and covered it up with this shiny new toy.
Question in chat about skill bars, you've got 15. Make room. You're not using ranged, make room. You're not using melee, make room, come on.
Yeah, I mean,
if I don't use 15, you don't need to use 15.
The style is ass.
True. I want back to mage range.
Jagex has now walked back a lot of these changes, and Necromancy firmly stands as the beginner style in the game now. So we fixed combat right, this style cannot abuse stalling. Or can it? Necromancer can still cast MacLeod, but it costs a full global cooldown, just like the inbuilt auto. You can still release stalls with this MacLeod though, but only special attacks can be stored into stalls within Necromancy, as they work on a separate set of rules. Then when releasing the stalls, you lock your character's next auto attack to be MacLeod, so it's imperative that it's cleared somehow. This happens with every style when stalling, but it's only really impactful with Necro, as it eats an entire global cooldown if it's not dealt with. So when Jagex tried to remove this tool from Necromancers aiming for a more casual audience, they still left it in and made it an even more complicated tool to use. But is a complicated combat system necessarily a bad thing? A lot of people like old school RuneScape, where base combat is easy, but a majority of the population can't get into high-end PvM because of difficulty, and this is seen as a good thing. How come in RuneScape, a game that has been endlessly criticized for its lack of interesting grinds and a simplification, a large portion of the population wants to simplify it even further? What sense of achievement is there in anything, if everything is easy? What boss do you remember from Elden Ring most vividly?
Heed my words. I am Melania, Blade of Mikola, and I have never known defeat.
Did beating her bring you satisfaction? Did you improve in the process? Did that victory feel significant? I'm not claiming that a game with farmable bosses difficulty should be as extreme, but what I am hoping is that we can see the unique combat system RuneScape offers and have a better onboarding experience rather than to trim all the fat. The counter-argument to my views is that RuneScape is a comfort game and combat should be easy and comfortable. The lazy pace of the global cooldown and automation of Revolution brings about a much more relaxed experience compared to any other action RPG. This fits in way better with RuneScape's otherwise relaxed and cozy pace, and the current contrast in the highly skilled and technical endgame combat compared to simple questing and mostly AFK skilling can be seen as a detriment to new players. Necromancy has however bridged this gap, and more people consider themselves PVMers than ever before. Even if the general game knowledge and skill hasn't changed much, the shortcuts that necromancy offers to access content are vast and wide scaling. It won't even be an exaggeration to say that the only gear progression path currently in RuneScape is necromancy, as it is the only style that doesn't have years of content gradually building power. Rather, it skips ahead, both in skill and in gear. But what does it matter for the average player that an elite player does double their damage? Does it matter to me that LeBron can dunk and I can't? Well, games can be a little different, and the feeling of aspirational success can be void if that success looks too difficult. But most of the times people miss the forest for the trees. These auto attacks and stalling provide a small benefit to those who've already mastered basic combat and are looking for ways to make it more exciting and fun. Even without these mechanics, the best PvRers would be better than you. These just push them just a little bit further. The average player would get closer by reducing these tools available. But is that really the solution? In a landscape of games where one of the biggest criticisms is that everything is becoming too simple and easy, is the correct method of distinguishing RuneScape from the competition joining the simple easy train? Or should we keep our outdated relics as a cool tech people can use to their advantage when getting into the game, even promote it like old school is doing? It is sort of insane that such a powerful mechanic has been in the game for over a decade, and there's literally zero mention of it in the game. Like nothing, it's just... And I think it makes the issue even more dividing than it actually is, because people are afraid of the unknown. Yes, even more than your mom walking in and catching you playing RuneScape. When you see a speedrunner nuke a boss with weird mechanics you'd never even heard of, it looks like cheating, and you might think, oh wow, that's cool. Well, when these same mechanics are used to effectively compete in farming the same bosses for GP, it feels like something out of your control is nerfing you. Rather than dismantling complex systems, we should aim to provide better tools to understand them, and let the naturally evolved, more skilled player base of RuneScape enjoy the power creep that actual knowledge, skill and application provides. We are at a crossroads. Jagex is planning to completely rework every single combat style, taking their learnings from necromancy, bringing forth a new era of combat for RuneScape. No matter what changes they make, someone is going to be unhappy. But it's clear that their vision and mission is new player onboarding. When you're watching this video, auto attacks could already be a relic from the past, a distant memory of better times. I just hope that taking away the unique way RuneScape's auto attacks work doesn't lose us our game's biggest and most dedicated fans.